Good morning. Can y'all hear me? Can you hear me? Okay, got it connected now. Welcome to the Income Tax Subcommittee of the Ways and Means Committee. I'm going to call this meeting to order. We have only one measure before us today. It's House Resolution 324 LC 432697 by Chairman Houston. It is a hearing only, a first hearing rather, and so we will not be moving it today, but hearing only. And Chairman Houston, if you'd like to present the measure.
Thank you. Did you call out the LC number?
Yes, ma'am.
I don't know how many of y'all are aware of the job tax credit tier system, and I would like to have a study committee to review the job tax credit tier system. Well, for two reasons. One is that it's sort of personal that my county, which is a real rural county, was in Tier 1 and it got moved to Tier 2, and I went to check to see why, and I didn't think some of the reasons were very valid. One, it said the unemployment rate was so high, and I said, how do you judge the unemployment rate? And they say the unemployment rate is by the number of people who go to the employment office looking for a job. Well, the labor departments were closed in my district. I'm 30-something miles from one thing and 24 to another if they were open. So people can't go to the unemployment thing. And then as far as a lot of people looking for a job that was my water.
Was it?
Yeah. The cold water was mine.
I'll be right back.
No, don't you do that. Now, I'll drink the hot water. No, he's already drank out of that.
All right now.
I'm sorry.
I'm losing control.
I wasn't thinking. It just came out.
Chairman Houston's water has been stolen.
I'm sorry. I know it.
Not a problem.
And I know it bothers me not only for my county to be discriminated like that, but it also I don't like the way the federal government does unemployment. They'll say unemployment rate's 2.6 or something unemployment, but yet you see all these people don't have jobs, and you see people standing around with no job. It needs to be the number of people who need or want to go to work or looking for a job. But anyway, I talked with Christopher Nunn, and there are three regions. One is the poverty level, one is the unemployment level, and one is the per capita income. And thank you, sir. And so another county that really concerns me was Baker County. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Baker County. Baker County is in Gerald Green's district. It's in way, way low South Georgia. And they had too high per capita income. But you've got to realize, if you know anything about Baker County, Mr. Woodruff had the big plantation down there with 36,000 acres, and he gave it when his foundation took over, and that's where the Jones Ecological Center is, and then there are a lot of real big landowners. Doug Ivester, who used to be president of Coca-Cola, has become one of the biggest landowners in South Georgia. And when you put those people in and average them out with other folks, that doesn't really give you the true per capita income. And Commissioner Nunn said that Jay Powell was concerned about this years ago, and he thought maybe we need to look at the number of people on free and reduced lunches. And but anyway, what I talked with Christopher a long time this morning, and he said that he hoped that if we did this study, he thought we needed it, he could come and give us the data about how they selected it and see how it was done now, and then see what suggestions. And some people didn't really know exactly how it was done and that sort of stuff. But now, like he told me, he said, well, that you have a high income, they probably got Ingles, they go buy groceries in. I said, listen, in Baker County, they don't have a Ingles or Publix or Kroger that I don't even know what they have. But I'm down there. I've got a farm in Calhoun County right next to there, and I go to Baker County to pick up some people who worked for my son. And so many people down there. If you go through a county and you've got your washing machine out in the backyard, you've got some poverty. So,
Chairman Knight, do you have a question? I'm sorry. Chairman Knight, do you have a question?
Question or more of a comment to my sweet mate. Your question about people who understand and know about Baker County, I can say I do because I lived there for a while. And you're correct in your assessments. Overall, I think you're on the right track here, and I would think that it would be very helpful for this committee to hear from the commissioner on this to make sure we're the whole committee is familiar with how these tiers are currently calculated, and is it meeting this mission? As you brought out, there may be some problems with how these tiers are defined and calculated. That may be a good thing to have him in here as we examine this bill to make sure that we're working off these facts, and I appreciate you bringing this to the committee's attention.
well, thank you. And he really wants to participate. I wasn't aware that Jay Powell had these concerns years ago too. So it's not something that I just thought of. And he also told me, and I don't want to throw his name out here, that Representative Jasper had some concerns because I'm thinking is it Pickens County? I'm not sure what he represents, where Big Canoe is, and that really, all the people that live in Big Canoe should start to throw it off. It just doesn't balance out what the true income of the average person is. Mm-hmm.
Oh, I got two other questions. Chairman Carpenter.
Thank you, Chairman. I agree with you. I think that something that to be discussed would be, it's great if you got a bunch of retirees that have a bunch of money, but what about the working poor? And I think that's what the job tax credits are about. The folks in Big Canoe, like you said, they're not working. They're up there retiring. The people down there in Bank County, they're not working. So that's really not a reflection of the working folks and getting jobs that we're seeking to do. So.
Well, and it's not, that's just, I mean, I'm real pleased that everybody's doing well, and I don't mean to be discriminating against them, but we just got like you say, the jobs credit is to give people jobs.
Yeah. Recognize Representative Buckner.
I appreciate this bill as well, and I'm glad that we're going to look at other criteria because I've noticed sometimes these tiers change kind of at random times, and it's always seemed like random reasons. So I'd love to know more about what the tiers are going to be based upon and how they're going to be assigned and when they adjust them. So I'd love to work on it or at least observe it. I love it.
Good.
Thank you for bringing it.
Do we have any other questions? So, Merritt's, thank you for bringing this, Chairman Houston. One thing you mentioned is free and reduced lunches. Is that's not used in the calculation now, as I understand it? That really is a good indicator of poverty, right there. It's another, so we can look at the metrics and of how it's being decided now and get educated on it, if nothing else. So, if there are no other questions for Chairman Houston, income tax study committee stands. Do we have anybody that wants to testify on this one?
That's different.
Okay. This income tax subcommittee stands adjourned.
We'll go ahead and call the ad valorem subtax committee to order. Our next, or the only bill we're hearing today that is on our agenda is Senate Bill 220. Senator Goodman, I think I just saw you come in. Please, right there would be great. Senator Goodman, will you proceed and tell us about your bill?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, for allowing me to present this bill. Senate Bill 220, the Georgia Farmland Conservation Act. This bill and this legislation, this policy proposal was really brought to me from our Commissioner of Agriculture, Tyler Harper. One of the things that I found out through researching this bill and through getting educated as a seventh generation South Georgia farmer, we have 38 million acres of land in the state of Georgia. In 1974, we had 12.6 million acres of farmland in the state of Georgia. Today, that number is 9.9 million acres of farmland. So in less than 50 years, we've lost 20% of our farmland in the state of Georgia. This bill, essentially what it creates is a PACE program, which is a Purchase of Agricultural Conservation Easement program. There are 29 other states that have similar programs in place. In the state of Florida, where they've had a program like this in place for a number of years, they've been able to put about 57,000 acres in protection. State of North Carolina, they've been able to protect about 28,000 acres. Totally across the country through these programs, it's about 3.2 million acres of land that we've been able to protect. And this is important because the population, I mean, you look at the yield curve and the population curve, the yield curve is not keeping up with the population curve. So if we're going to feed our children and grandchildren in the future, we've got to protect farmland. What this bill does is it includes the creation of the program, it includes the creation of the trust fund, it includes the creation of the council that will annually select the properties that participate in the program. The intent of the bill is to establish a Purchase Agricultural Conservation Easement program. As I said earlier, 29 other states already have PACE programs, and this bill is modeled after programs that are already established in Texas, North Carolina, Virginia, and Pennsylvania. PACE program is a state-led initiative to partner with farmers who wish to protect the state's best farmland for future generations. And I should say this, the USDA allocates $450 million a year to help fund these programs, and it's a dollar-for-dollar match. And so once you create the fund, there's private money that can come into it. There's state money that can be in it. That also can be local money. But there's, for all, whether that money's private, state, or local, there's a dollar-for-dollar match that comes down from the USDA. And what it basically, if you have a farmer that wants to keep his land, he wants to be able to keep it in agricultural production, he can sell an easement basically on his farm, and the easement is in perpetuity. It has to stay in farmland forever, basically. But I see it especially being a tool for, say, folks that may have a small farm and development is encroached on it. I see it as a tool to be able to possibly cover inheritance taxes, that kind of deal, when it passes down to the next generation. But that's basically what this program is. It's when you ask, the easements, as I say, last in perpetuity. So you would want to make sure if you had a farm and you had a portion of the land that maybe you might think your grandchildren want to build a house on or something one day, you would not want to include that in the easement. How does it impact taxes? The preparation costs are tax deductible for the property owner, and the value of the property is reduced to approximately 40% of its normal value for future property tax considerations. This is due to the restrictions that are placed on the property. Walking through the bill, if you look at on page 3, this is establishing the trust fund for state funding as previously discussed. Page 4, this is defining the framework of the program. Page 5, this is establishing the selection criteria for eligible farmland that wants to participate in the program. And page 6, this is defining the makeup of the advisory council that will make the selections on the annual participants, and also the council voting parameters. Like I said before, this is not something that's new. The state of Georgia has just not been participating in it. 29 other states have. And, my dad always used to say, if you take care of the land will take care of you. That's kind of what the intention of this bill is to try to protect our farmland for future generations.
Senator, that's a very interesting proposition here. Again, I want to thank you for bringing this because, as we look at this bill, I think there's a bigger conversation that's going on right now as we see Georgia as a very diverse state. We're very much excelling in bringing business, and people are moving into this state. But the state's also very diverse. And again, if we look at agriculture as our number one business, we want to make sure that we're not harming or doing any harm to ag, and in the rural parts of the state where that is very important. I'm very curious. This is the first time I've heard of this, and I did not understand there were how many other states that you said had a program that was very similar to this?
29.
29.
Mm-hmm. 29 states.
That would be interesting, Senator, if you've got some data that we could get and obviously we do 2 hearings but that would be some data I would be interested to
Sure.
look at and start to look at some of those other programs and see the success of that. We do have some questions, if you would mind answering some. The first one is gentleman to your left, Chairman Martin.
I feel like we can just talk, but we'll talk into the microphone. So, thank you. A couple of questions. You say purchase the easement, and how much is that on an acre basis? How's that decided?
There's a formula that's done about, and is Catherine Moore, are you here? Would you want to talk about the would you mind coming up? Is that okay, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, if you'll join, you can sit right there, or you can join.
Mr. Chairman, in the interest of time, if it's a detail, I'm happy to get the information off. I think that was an
Well,
interesting.
I'd be interested in,
Sure.
in hearing since we have witness here.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Catherine Moore. I'm president of Georgia Conservancy, and there would be an appraisal. A farmland conservation easement is not dissimilar from other easements you all may have heard of for habitat protection, timberland protection, so forth. So there would be an appraisal. You can imagine in different parts of the state, land is valued in different places, but there would be an appraisal process upon which the value of the rights given up by the underlying property owner would be determined. But the 40% the Senator mentioned is an excellent rule of thumb.
Okay.
Well, if I can follow up on that, so give me an order of magnitude in other states. How much is this per acre? Is it $1 an acre? Is it $10,000? I'm just looking for an order of magnitude here.
No, thank you.
Because that's, I'm concerned at the, appraisals are subjective. I'm just concerned about 2 things. What the numbers would be, then the, Well, I'll stop at that. Do you have, in other states, what are they spending on average per acre to do?
I can get that for
Okay.
you, and we will. What we have is some of the aggregate impacts that the Senator already mentioned, some of the programs, specifically not exclusively, but the southeastern states who have programs like this. The Senator's already referenced some of the total acreage protected and some of the total dollars expended, and we could break that down for you. I'd be happy to.
Thank you. And if I could just, the other follow-up, as it kind of goes along this, I guess I'll do this in the form of a question. What I'm concerned is we had something in another committee this year about the state owning a lot of land in a particular county, and the county being in a position where they can't make ends meet, and they're coming back to the state for you all to do this for us. It's concerning to me. Farmland, is it not true that it's appraised on what you're doing now? You don't necessarily in a county get people talk about highest and best use. That's not the proper way to appraise farmland, correct? They don't appraise your farmland as you can build a condo on it. They appraise you on what you're doing on it. So if you're farming on it and you're going to keep farming on it, how much has it really reduced in today's value to get a tax that the county has to take, and the county and the school board has to take a haircut of 40%? I understand you're losing future rights, but you're not paying that tax now. So I'm having a hard time grasping why you reel back. You only pay tax on 40% of the land if you're still doing what you were doing, and you weren't taxed on the future value of the land. So help me out on where that comes about.
Well, I welcome the senator to add anything to this, and let me pull back, not avoiding your question, but pull back to clarify. This would be, I'll call it a small but mighty program. I understand the point that you're referencing, some of our counties that are concerned about their underlying tax digest, and that is something to be concerned about, or be watchful of, I should say. But I think this program, through criteria and rules that we'll set up, will probably have geographic diversity as one of the components that the Department of Ag would consider. I don't necessarily see, this is intended to benefit a variety of places that are under threat of development across the state. So I don't think you'll see, for lack of a better word, a volume of acres just concentrated in one area that this program would put under protection.
Fair enough. Then either the senator or you, to the question of, if you're farming on it now and it's taxed on the fact you're farming, and you enter into an easement that says you're going to keep farming, why should your taxes be reduced? Because you're not paying tax on you're not paying ad valorem tax on what you might do with the property one day. So why are we because if one farmer goes into it and they're paying 40% ad valorem tax, the farmer next to him that's still farming doesn't do it or can't do it because there's not enough money, we've created an unequal playing field, have we not?
And Chairman, I think you make a good question, but if I can iterate now, I think the only way that currently we have CUVA. That is exactly why we, for farm, timber, wetlands, just natural wildlife habitat. So we do have that is the purpose of what we did with CUVA, which was to, lower that valuation to give those farmers, timbermen, et cetera, an opportunity to be taxed at a less or a conservation use value. And that's a covenant for only 10 years. If I may, and I'm not sure this answers or speaks to your question, but this is not just a 10-year sort of span or a covenant. This is in perpetuity from a point of view of you sold all the rights, if you will, to do anything other than, I guess, farming on that land in perpetuity. So it's a more of a permanent one than versus just the CUVA that I think we've all familiar with.
I understand, and I won't belabor the point, Chairman, but I understand that. But the issue is you've cut down the future value of what you'll be able to sell it for, and you're being paid for that right. You're being paid for that interest in the property. And the fact that it's valued at this for the county to farm, and you're going to keep farming. I mean, we can talk later. That's just where I see the disparity.
And we will get some clarification on that. I think there is a difference, but we can get some clarification on that.
Sir, could I add one larger picture item? As the senator mentioned when he was introducing the bill, it is this program is intended for properties that are under the threat of development. So some of our counties that are more removed from the growth pattern that we're seeing would not necessarily qualify. So by definition of that, because I want to speak to the concern or the potential concern of the underlying tax digest, an area that would qualify or a reason a property would get some points, say in an evaluation process as being under threat of development, that by the very definition is telling us that growth has already come around it. So there is some value being recognized by the underlying government for property owners who have chosen to develop.
Isn't it true, though, the government today can buy the property rights from people without a state law? If it's a private transaction between, if the governor, without violating the anti-gratuity portion, if they see it as a value to us to keep that, they can buy that right. They can buy any other right to the property. They can do that today without a state law. It just doesn't affect their tax digest. So that's the thing that gives me a bit of
but there's also not a dollar for dollar match for that coming down from the federal government.
But let's, and I think we've got a question or a concern here on this issue that if we can note and we can come back with more details to discuss it. Next is Chairman Williamson. Are you number 5?
Right,
is that
number
correct?
5.
Yes.
Is it on?
Yes, sir.
Ms. Moore, I just have a couple of quick questions with you. You know, for all the reasons these Boy Scouts out in the hall, we've got to protect our natural resources and recreational opportunities and family farms. So I applaud this whole effort because their children and grandchildren, the children and grandchildren of these Scouts, I hope they're staying in Georgia and have the recreational opportunities that we all enjoyed coming along. That being said, educate me now. I know for a fact there's some sort of a conservation use program already in effect that you can donate the future on the appraisal part, Chairman Martin, as I understand it, you can take a piece of land, do an appraisal based on the future economic production of that land. And I'll give you an example. You have land that's got high quality granite on it. Well, you could get it permitted and have a granite quarry. So then you can have an economic model done of the future production over a lifespan of a quarry. You know, figure out what the mineral reserves there are, and over a 40-year time period, this quarry could produce so much revenue over time. You pull it back to net present value of this theoretical value, and then donate it for perpetual easement. You don't own the property anymore, but you own the rights to recreate on that property. Am I not correct? Am I off base so far, Ms. Moore?
Yeah, I believe I'm following you.
Okay. Well, so there's a lot of acreage in Georgia that's gone in fact into these kind of programs, and the donors enjoy huge tax benefits, some of which have been abused, and the IRS is coming back and based on the sort of pie in the sky appraisals have been challenging these arrangements. But the overarching intent was to get this land out of the path of development for future generations. Is that not correct?
Yes, sir. That's primarily the intent of most, and I'm speaking writ large, conservation easement programs, is to preserve
what's the name
some
of the
value.
one that I'm trying to describe? I do not know the name of it. I know there's a lot of acreage in Georgia that's gone into it because a lot of tax shelters have been sort of spun around, syndicated, and sold.
We have a couple of different options for timber protection. For CUVA's been mentioned already. The state of Georgia has a Georgia conservation tax credit program. So we have a couple of different buckets of ways that private sector or others can contribute to conservation values for themselves as private property owners, for the state of Georgia for environmental, natural purposes. So there's several that I would think you're alluding to.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, I think the one you're referring to, it made mention of the IRS, and that is a federal one, and we may piggyback off of that with our state conservation
Tax credit.
That option. But you're talking, I think, specific because the IRS, the federal one, and yes, you are correct. That one has come under, I think, some scrutiny in the past for abuse. I'm just going to call it for what it was because of that future fair market value that you eloquently described and coming back. So if I'm not mistaken, this one is, and I want to make sure this is correct, this one is just state. This would not have anything to do necessarily with the federal conservation that particular program. It would be at state level only. Am I correct or incorrect?
As the senator mentioned, this could draw down dollar for dollar match federal funds, but these would be federal agriculturally focused funds.
Yeah.
So this would be.
But from a IRS the tax deduction perspective, it's totally separate. Okay, and we are going to have to move on. We got a couple of questions. I'm going to ask to be brief because I think this is.
Can I just say one thing?
Yeah.
Tax deductions are fine. Our tax credits are fine, but for a lot of farmers, they don't need tax credits because you know what I'm saying. And this is.
Yeah. If they needed tax credits, they'd have some income.
Right.
So
And so that,
good point, Senator.
Yeah.
Good point. All right, real quick, Representative Buckner.
Thank you. I like the concept, but there are two details at least that I'm concerned about. You mentioned something about this having some kind of relation with inheritance and being able to pass the farm down. And then something was mentioned over here about the farms that would be eligible would be the ones that are in the crosshairs of development. So can you help me understand, would any farm be able to take advantage of this to be able to make it be where it could be inherited by future generations regardless of how close development is to them?
So when you sell this easement, it's protecting this farmland in perpetuity. I mean, it's forever. But the council and the bill outlines how the council is going to be formed and who gets picked and everything are going to grade the projects basically. If you have different folks wanting to apply, and this board is going to go through these projects and grade which projects score the highest, and then it would be at that point that they would decide what who is successful in their application.
Okay. May I follow up with a real quick one? I promise it's quick. So I noticed on line 66 it talks about this being a trust fund and that it comes under to be dispersed as other monies in the trust fund. But how will this affect the 1% cap of the budget with other trust funds, or is this separate from that entirely?
No, it's separate. It's a separate trust fund.
Thank you. I promised to be quick.
Thank you. This was it's a very interesting bill. I was following up on Chairman Williamson's question, though. I guess currently you can donate this highest and best use even without abusing it. There may be a way. Will this council be able to look at different options? Because some in the path of development, even a syndication of the value of donating that easement with the tax deductions federally that go with it, which is at 40%, not our little 5.75. That could be a much more valuable way, or a way to protect valuable property in the path of development, rather than the state trying to estimate the expense of that. I mean, is there a way? Is that council going to be able to look at all the other options they have, whether it's the Georgia Outdoor Stewardship Fund or other ways to purchase this that we have now, along with this council? But the fact that the value of that donation of an easement, whether it was through a syndication or something else, might be a way to have federal funds protect this farmland in the same goals that Chairman Williamson mentioned. Will this council be able to look at both those options, even though they won't be in charge of one of them, but one might produce much more
right and
value?
Yes,
to the
council will be able to look at each property and grade and see what, and that could come into the consideration in terms of. But when the council looks at this project, if you have if you have somebody that owns a farm, and they're a high earning individual, maybe the tax credit's the direction they need to go, and that would come into the formula. But if it's a guy with chicken houses or a dairy or whatever else, and we all know what the margins are in production agriculture, this gives them an avenue to be able to keep the farm and to be able to protect that agricultural production in perpetuity.
We've got four more folks that have questions, and I know we're on a tight timeline here, so I'm going to ask to be brief, and I'm going to go ahead. Representative Chairman Washburn, Houston, Stevens, and then Dickey, and those are the ones that I'm going to go in that order. So if you will, please remember our time constraints. Let's see, Washburn, what, seven?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Question for the chair. This is hearing only.
Yes, that is true.
Just a brief statement, Senator Goodman. Thank you for bringing this. I think it's very intriguing, and but it is complicated. And my one thought immediately is forever is a long, long time. And so we do have so many issues now to deal with housing. And I've heard this week from folks in the farming community who are concerned about agricultural land, so I commend you for bringing it. But I do want to give it a lot more thought. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Absolutely. Chairman Houston.
Thank you for bringing this. I really didn't realize until the last 2 or 3 weeks that 2,000 acres of farmland in southwest Georgia under irrigation have been taken out of production for solar farms, and solar farms is not farming, and we need this land for food.
Yes, ma'am. Solar farms would not.
And it is a problem that they're taking so much farmland out for other purposes.
So solar farms
You can tell I like to eat.
Yeah, and solar farms are not eligible
Yeah.
for this program.
But you know, it's scary when you're taking 2,000 acres of irrigated land out of prime farming land.
Well, and it's a scary thing to me when you realize that we've lost 20% of our farmland in this state in 49 years. That is, I mean, just let that sink in. In 49 years, not even a generation, and the velocity of that loss is
I was starting to say
increasing
it's
at a greater rate.
yeah, and those are some things that I think you bring to point in discussions that I think we're having all over the country right now. So those are good points. Real quickly, and again, I want to make sure we get to all of our members on the committee. Number 2, Chairman Dickey. 2. Hold on. Hit your butt. There you go.
Chairman Gooden, thank you for bringing this bill.
Stevens.
You know, you're right about losing farmland, but some of our counties, it's much worse than the figures you mentioned. Some of our marginal counties where development is really coming in very, very strong, and it's a huge pressure on landowners, farmers, to sell their land and stop farming. And agriculture is the largest industry, as you know, we have in this state, and it's a huge workforce. Probably 10% of our workers in this state are engaged in some form or fashion tied to agriculture. And I just think we need a public-private partnership that this bill kind of attempts to go to, that I think leverages private donations, some state work, federal, and I just think it's a good value if we do this program right. Target the areas that are sensitive, that would give great value back to the citizens of this state to keeping agriculture and as Chairman Williamson said, our recreation and environmental sensitive areas that are being farmed. And so I think it's a lot of great reasons that we need to really look, Mr. Chairman, at this bill very closely. I think it will give great long-term benefits to the citizens of Georgia.
Thank you, Chairman. And Chairman Stevens, you are the last one, number 8.
And I'll be brief. I'm just curious if this property, and I'm sure all of it's in a conservation ACUVA, for ad valorem purposes so that they aren't taxed off their land, would they still be able to, since they're still going to own the property if they sell it in perpetuity and still own the property, would the ACUVA still be in effect? In other words, can you have an ad valorem tax savings to the farmer in addition to being paid for in perpetuity for owning the property?
That may be that's a good question, Chairman, and that's one that we may want to look into. I'm not sure you would need to have the need for both, because if you had permanently basically sold all your other rights except to farm here, then maybe the value of the land is
That's what I don't
and it's yeah.
That's what I was trying to.
And so I think that's a great question. Is this something that is building? You got A over B, and we're stacking them, or is this one that is, hey, if you choose this option, should it move forward, and we look at this in the future? Do you need how does that interact with our current CUVA? Because again, the CUVA gives the landowner a right to enter into a 10-year covenant, but it's not permanent in nature. So I'm not sure how that would work, but I'm sure that we could get answers and look into how that would affect CUVA if both were to be in effect and become law. Okay.
This would be intended for properties that are again under threat of development or not otherwise in some type of protective vehicle, we'll call it, for lack of a better label, and it's intended as a cash payment. I mean, the senator mentioned this is for farmers. You might have a high earning farm property individual company, but this is intended as an alternative to accepting a development offer for those families that choose, or individuals that choose to take this route, because they've got that passion to keep the land in agriculture.
Chairman,
Yes, sir.
you want to finish it up,
Well,
and
I
then
was
we'll.
just going to say this. I don't think that the people that participate in this program will be able to have both. I think if you go through with this and you put your property in this easement, I don't think you'll be able to participate in the CUVA program as well, because the whole point of CUVA is 10 years, right?
Mhm.
And so this is in perpetuity. So I don't think you would be able to participate in both programs.
Two similar mechanisms, but you wouldn't necessarily be able to avail yourself of both. You'd probably choose one of the other.
That's right. And so if you think that you would like it one day for your heirs to be able to sell the property, but you want to keep it for 10 years that you're not going to do with it, that's one thing. But if a family gets together and they decide that they want to protect that land in perpetuity, this is a vehicle to do that.
So, Senator, I want to thank you. This has been a very good discussion. I think there's some very good questions and points that have been brought up. So if we can take some notes on sort of what we've heard today, and maybe get some more information, and again, thank you, because I know we're all concerned with Georgia's natural resources, and especially a lot of our agricultural land that is disappearing.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for
All right, we'll get right on. We've got to get moving here to get into House rules. So let's do that. There's Senator again. Senator again. I'm going to call this Sales Tax Subcommittee of the House Ways and Means Committee to order, and we have one item on the agenda this afternoon, or morning, I guess. Still, Senator again. We're going to let you tell us about Senate Resolution 214.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. I think everybody that lives in Georgia pays taxes to at least one local government. That'd be a county, and you may pay taxes to two. You may pay city and county taxes. To me, I'm chairing the state and local government in the Senate this year. For me, one of the things that I've been in discussions with both ACCG and GMA, this resolution puts together a study committee to look at some of the wedge issues that happen in so many communities around the state where the cities and counties can't reach agreement on service delivery or sales tax money. And unfortunately, the victim here is the citizens of Georgia, that when that happens, a lot of litigation takes place. There's a lot of wasted effort in that. And so what we want to try to do is work with our partners at ACCG, GMA, and our local governments to look at how to resolve that. So this study committee will be up to 5 meetings. It's something that I think is very fiscally sound for the folks in Georgia, because if we can put an effort forward in how to make those negotiations go better and get those things moving, we save all the taxpayers money. So that's what the resolution does. I won't bore you with the reading it to you, because I know all of y'all can read better than me. Would ask for your favorable consideration, Mr. Chairman.
Senator, again, we have 2 people that want to speak to your proposition. You can stay there, and we'll direct them over here. In order, Dante Handel from ACCG and Ryan Bowersock from GMA. Gentlemen, we are on a schedule this morning. I know y'all want, you got friends for it and friends against it, and you're with your friends. So just keep us brief.
Morning, Chairman Martin, members of the committee. Thank you for having me. So my name's Dante Handel. I'm with ACCG, and just wanted to thank Chairman Ginn for bringing this resolution and express our support for the measure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Bowersock. We'll give you equal time.
Do not need even equal time. Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Ryan Bowersock, GMA. We're also in support of the resolution. Thank you, Chairman Ginn, for bringing this, and we look forward to working with the committee. So,
well, Chairman Ginn, we got everybody together. I don't see why we need a study committee. We should just get both those guys to shake hand and agree that a county shouldn't hold cities hostage, nor should a city hold county hostage, as was done in my local area here this past year. We have another very important person that would like to weigh in on this bill, the chairman of the committee, Chairman Shaw Blackman.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Senator, for bringing this over here. We'll. Is there any particular reason, and your friends may or may not want to weigh in on this, any particular reason this is scaled back to just a lost, or is there, versus maybe some of the other most or host or splost or any of these?
Well, when we look at sales tax money, we'll probably get into discussions about host, most, and other types of sales tax. But because we are all mandated, and lost is one of those things that, as you know, is providing taxpayer relief to every citizen in the state. That's where we focused it on there. But we can easily take in other types of sales tax and other options on sales tax. For me, the try to stay in my lane. I try not to get too far out of that. But that's one of the things that it is a wedge issue, and I think there's some opportunities for us to do this. And so we're asking for members of the legislature, as well as local elected officials or local officials that have great knowledge on this. So for me, I think has a good opportunity to save taxpayers money.
I saw Mr. Bowersock shaking his head yes, but I couldn't tell if Dante was doing okay. All right. I just was kind of curious. Thank you. That was it. I keep it brief. Thank you.
He was blocked out. Was him?
I think I got nods.
Number 7 is President Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator, certainly understand the impetus for the resolution. I was looking at the committee makeup, and just I see we have designated that one member of the committee will be the committee chairman, for which you chair in the Senate, and then our governmental affairs chairman. You think that since we're talking about taxes, that maybe we ought to make sure that the chairman of Ways and Means and the chairman of Finance is included on that discussion as well?
Entirely good decisions that y'all can make in the House. So I'll let y'all make those appointments.
All right, thank you.
I'll note for the record, the senator said that the House could make the appointment of the Senate folks. No, I'm just kidding. I understand what the senator's saying. Any further questions? Any further questions? Senator, this is the first hearing on the matter. We'll get with Chairman Blackman, and we'll get you back up. I think the full committee doesn't meet till next week, so we have an ample opportunity to get you
appreciate your time
before the subcommittee. And I was especially glad to hear you echo the fact that this loss is supposed to be relative to service delivery. I think there are a lot of folks that tend to take their portion of the loss and spend it in the general fund. I'm not sure exactly that's exactly the way it was laid out to work. But we'll maybe talk about that during the during the study committee.
Thank you.
So with that, if there are no further questions, we'll carry this over for a second hearing at Chairman Blackman's call. And if there's no further business before the sales tax committee, we'll stand adjourned without objection.
Thank.
I'll absolutely. I will then adjourn the sales tax subcommittee without objection and recognize from his point Chairman Ron Stevens to tee up the next one.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We will call to order the Public Finance and Policy Committee. If Senator Hickman will pull up a chair right here to hear Senate Bill 127, which came out of the Senate with a vote of 154 to 2. And Senator, you have the floor.
Thank y'all for allowing us to be here. We're talking about Senate Bill. Talking about Senate Bill 127. And let me just read from you to start off with. I'm going to read first, and I'll talk second. From the Senate Research Office, provides that local government authorities collecting more than $500,000 on hotel motel taxes per year in the last 3 years must not alter or change its designated private sector nonprofit organization, which in most cases is our Convention and Visitors Bureau, without the agreement of the destination marketing organization, Convention and Visitors Bureau, or if such agreement cannot be reached without going before the Hotel Motel Tax Performance Review Board, which is a part of the Department of Community Affairs. This bill, actually the language in this bill, which mirrored Representative Stevens' language in the House bill, was actually helped shape by the Georgia GMA, Georgia Municipal Association. And I'm here to tell you that both the GMA and ACCG are neutral on this bill. The big thing on this bill is it provides oversight of destination marketing organization funded by local hotel motel tax, commonly referred to as Convention and Visitors Bureau. As we all know, because we see it all the time, these conventions are scheduled 3, 4, and 5 years out, and it's very important for these organizations to have this money and know the money's there available when these conventions come to town. This really prevents the local government from altering an agreement with their destination marketing organization, Convention and Visitors Bureau, or changing to another without the approval of the organization, Convention and Visitors Bureau, or without going before the Performance and Review Board of the Department of Community Affairs. As stated earlier, this only applies to Convention and Visitors Bureau that collect over $500,000, and I think the number on that is, Mr. Chairman, is somewhere around 70 or 80 in the state of Georgia. So it's really a very easy bill. I know y'all already had some conversation on it, and so I would open it up for questions that I would think either me or the chairman could answer.
Yes, sir. No, sir.
I think the chairman's seen this before, so we'll get your input and get it on again for another hearing and passage next week. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the presentation.
Thank you, sir. Great day.
We're adjourned, and we'll go